What happens when a British television veteran with decades of experience goes head-to-head with one of America's most controversial talk show hosts? Well, you're about to witness one of the most explosive confrontations ever caught on live television. Denise Welch, known for her no-nonsense approach and fearless commentary, was invited as a guest on The View to discuss her latest mental health advocacy work. What should have been a straightforward interview quickly spiraled into an all-out war of words that left the studio audience gasping and viewers at home reaching for their remotes. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about celebrity feuds on live TV. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single second of what unfolds next. The morning started like any other at the View studios in New York. Denise Welch had flown in from Manchester specifically for this interview. Excited to share her passion project about mental health awareness with an American audience. She had done her research on the show, knew the format, and felt prepared for what she thought would be a supportive conversation. Little did she know that Joy Behar had other plans entirely. As Denise settled into her chair during the commercial break, she could sense something was off. The usual warm-up banter between hosts seemed forced, and Joy kept shuffling through her notes with an intensity that made the other co-hosts visibly uncomfortable. Whoopi Goldberg tried to lighten the mood with a joke about British accents, but even that fell flat in the tense atmosphere. When they came back from commercial, Joy wasted no time launching into her prepared questions, but her tone was already sharper than what Denise had expected based on their brief pre-show chat. "So, Denise," Joy began, leaning forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've been quite vocal about mental health issues, but some critics say that celebrities talking about depression and anxiety is just another way to stay relevant. How do you respond to that?" 1. The question caught Denise completely off guard. This wasn't the supportive platform she had been promised when her publicist arranged the appearance. She could feel her defenses rising, but maintained her composure. "Well, Joy, I think that's quite a cynical way to look at it," Denise replied, her British accent becoming more pronounced as she tried to stay calm. "When someone like myself shares their struggles with mental health, it's not about staying relevant. It's about removing the stigma and helping people who are suffering in silence realize they're not alone." Joy nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't buying it. "But don't you think there's a difference between genuine advocacy and what some might call performative activism? I mean, you're promoting a book, you're on a publicity tour." The other co-hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Sarah Haynes tried to jump in with a more supportive question, but Joy held up her hand, clearly not finished with her line of questioning. "I'm sorry, but I have to push back on that," Denise said, her voice remaining steady but her eyes flashing with the first signs of irritation. "I've been talking about mental health long before I had any book to promote. I've been open about my bipolar disorder for over a decade, because I believe transparency saves lives." "Bipolar disorder," Joy repeated, emphasizing each word. "That's quite convenient, isn't it? These days, everyone seems to have some sort of mental health diagnosis. Whatever happened to just having a bad day?" The studio fell silent. Even the camera operators seemed to sense that something was about to go very wrong. Denise's jaw tightened, and for a moment, she looked like she was calculating whether to walk off the set or stay and fight. "Convenient?" Denise repeated slowly, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Joy, are you seriously suggesting that my mental health struggles are convenient? That the years of therapy, medication, and genuine fear for my own safety were just, what, a publicity stunt?" Joy realized she had pushed too far, but instead of backing down, she doubled down, I'm just saying that in my generation, we didn't run to therapists every time life got tough. We dealt with our problems privately. Your generation also swept everything under the carpet and pretended it didn't exist. Denise shot back, her composure finally beginning to crack. How many people suffered in silence because of that attitude? How many people took their own lives because they were too ashamed to ask for help? The tension in the studio was now palpable. Whoopi tried to step in as the moderator, but both women were locked in their verbal battle, completely focused on each other. I think what Joy is trying to say, Whoopi began diplomatically, but Denise cut her off. No, Whoopi. I know exactly what Joy is trying to say, and frankly, it's dangerous. This kind of dismissive attitude toward mental health is exactly why we still have such a crisis in this country and around the world. Joy leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, clearly enjoying the fact that she had gotten under Denise's skin. Crisis might be a strong word. Maybe what we have is a generation that's been coddled into thinking every emotion needs to be analyzed and medicated. That was the moment Denise's famous temper finally erupted. Her face flushed red, and she leaned forward, pointing directly at Joy. Are you out of your mind? Denise exploded, her voice echoing through the studio with such force that several crew members looked up from their equipment. A generation that's been coddled? Joy, do you have any idea how ignorant you sound right now? Joy's eyes widened in shock. In all her years hosting The View, very few guests had ever spoken to her with such direct confrontation. She clearly wasn't prepared for this level of pushback. Excuse me? Joy stammered, sitting up straighter in her chair. I think you need to calm down and remember where you are. Where I am? Denise laughed bitterly, shaking her head in disbelief. I'm sitting across from someone who just trivialized the suffering of millions of people on national television. Someone who thinks that depression and anxiety are just fashionable trends rather than legitimate medical conditions that destroy lives. The other co-hosts were frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this play out. The producers in the control room were frantically signaling, but nobody seemed to know whether they should go to commercial or let this explosive moment continue. Now hold on just a minute, Joy said, her own temper beginning to flare. I never said depression wasn't real. I'm talking about the overdiagnosis, the rush to label every difficult emotion as a disorder. Oh. So now you're a medical expert? Denise shot back, her British accent cutting through the air like a blade. Tell me, Joy, what medical school did you attend? What psychiatric training do you have that qualifies you to determine who is and isn't genuinely suffering? Joy's face was turning red now, clearly not used to being challenged so directly by a guest. I don't need medical training to have an opinion. This is a talk show. We discuss things. Discuss things? Denise repeated incredulously. You're not discussing anything. You're spreading dangerous misinformation. You're perpetuating exactly the kind of stigma that keeps people from seeking help. Sarah Haynes finally managed to find her voice and tried to redirect the conversation. Maybe we can talk about the positive impact of mental health awareness campaigns. But Joy wasn't ready to let this go. Something about Denise's passionate response had clearly struck a nerve, and she was determined to maintain control of her own show. You know what I think? Joy said, leaning forward with a condescending smile. I think you British celebrities come over here and try to lecture us Americans about our problems, while you can't even sort out your own issues back home. The studio gasped audibly. Even Whoopi looked stunned at the personal nature of Joy's attack. Denise sat back in her chair for a moment, processing what had just been said to her. Did you just... Denise began slowly, her voice dangerously quiet. Did you just make this about nationality? Are you seriously suggesting that mental health is somehow an American versus British issue? I'm suggesting that maybe you should focus on your own country's problems before coming here to tell us how backwards we are, Joy replied, clearly pleased with what she thought was a winning comeback. Denise stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward from the force. The sudden movement caused a stir among the crew, and security took a step closer to the set, though they weren't sure if their intervention would be needed. You are absolutely unbelievable, Denise said, looking down at Joy with a mixture of anger and pity. This isn't about countries, or nationalism, or any of your petty political games. This is about human suffering, and you're turning it into some sort of twisted entertainment. Joy remained seated, but her defensive posture showed she was feeling the heat. I'm not turning anything into entertainment. You're the one who came on here promoting your book and getting emotional when someone asks legitimate questions. Legitimate questions? Denise repeated, her voice rising again. You called my mental health condition convenient. You dismissed an entire generation's struggle with mental health as being coddled. Nothing about your questions has been legitimate. Whoopi finally stepped in more forcefully, sensing that this confrontation was spiraling completely out of control. Ladies, I think we need to take a step back here. But Denise wasn't finished. She had clearly reached her breaking point, and years of advocating for mental health awareness had prepared her for exactly this kind of ignorant pushback. No, Whoopi. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to step back. Not when someone is sitting here spreading the exact kind of toxic attitudes that literally kill people. Joy, do you know how many people take their own lives because they're ashamed to admit they're struggling? Do you know how many families are destroyed because people are too proud or too scared to get help? Joy shifted uncomfortably, perhaps beginning to realize that she had picked a fight with someone far more prepared and passionate than she had anticipated. Of course, suicide is tragic, Joy said defensively, but that doesn't mean we can't have honest conversations about over-medication and over-diagnosis. Honest conversations? Denise laughed harshly. There's nothing honest about what you're doing. You're hiding behind the guise of having a conversation while actually just promoting harmful stereotypes and outdated thinking. The tension in the room had reached a fever pitch. Even the live audience seemed to be holding their breath, unsure whether they were witnessing television history or a complete disaster. Joy stood up now too, clearly not wanting to be literally looked down upon any longer. I've been doing this show for years, and I've never had a guest speak to me this way. Maybe that's the problem, Denise fired back immediately. Maybe if more people had the courage to challenge your outdated views, you wouldn't be sitting here in your ivory tower making pronouncements about things you clearly don't understand. The accusation hit its mark. Joy's face flushed even redder, and she took a step toward Denise, her professional composure completely abandoned. Ivory tower? Joy snapped, her voice reaching a pitch that made several audience members wince. You don't know anything about me or what I've been through in my life. And you don't know anything about mental health, Denise shot right back, not giving an inch. But the difference is, I'm not sitting here pretending to be an expert on your life experiences while you're literally doing exactly that about medical conditions you clearly don't understand. The other co-hosts looked like deer caught in headlights. This had gone so far beyond a typical heated discussion that none of them seemed to know how to regain control of the situation. Joy pointed an accusatory finger at Denise. Her professional mask completely slipped away. You came on this show with an agenda, and when someone doesn't just nod and agree with everything you say, you throw a tantrum like a child. A tantrum? Denise's voice rose to match Joy's volume. I'm standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. I'm fighting against the exact kind of ignorance that keeps people suffering in silence. If that's a tantrum to you, then I'm proud to be having one. The studio was electric with tension. Camera operators were getting close-ups of both women's faces, capturing every moment of this unprecedented confrontation. The live audience was completely silent, mesmerized by the raw emotion unfolding before them. You know what your problem is? Joy continued, clearly past the point of no return. You think because you've had some struggles, that makes you some sort of spokesperson for everyone with mental health issues. Well, newsflash, not everyone wants to air their personal business on television. Denise stared at Joy for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was steady, but filled with barely controlled fury. My problem, Joy, my problem is sitting right across from me. My problem is watching someone with a platform this big use it to spread misinformation and stigma. My problem is listening to someone dismiss the very real pain of millions of people because it doesn't fit into your narrow worldview. Joy crossed her arms defensively. I'm not dismissing anyone's pain. I'm questioning whether turning every human emotion into a medical diagnosis is actually helping anyone. There it is again, Denise said, shaking her head in disgust. You just can't help yourself. Can you? You keep minimizing. Keep dismissing. Keep reducing complex medical conditions to just emotions that people should be able to handle on their own. Whoopi made another attempt to restore order, standing up from her chair. I think we need to remember that we're on live television here. But neither woman was backing down. They were locked in a battle of wills that had transcended the typical bounds of daytime television. Let me tell you something about emotions, Joy, Denise said, her voice dropping to an intensity that was somehow more frightening than when she was shouting. When I was at my lowest point, when my bipolar disorder had me convinced that my family would be better off without me, those weren't just emotions I needed to toughen up and handle. That was a medical emergency that required professional intervention. Joy's expression flickered for just a moment, perhaps recognizing that she had pushed someone to a very personal and painful place. But according to your logic, Denise continued relentlessly, I should have pulled myself up by my bootstraps? Stopped being so coddled? Dealt with it privately like your generation supposedly did? I didn't say that, Joy mumbled, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Yes, you did, Denise fired back. That's exactly what you've been saying for the past 10 minutes. You've been suggesting that people like me are just looking for attention, just trying to stay relevant, just making excuses for normal human emotions. The confrontation had reached such an intensity that even the crew members were riveted, forgetting their professional duties to watch this unprecedented television moment unfold. Joy tried to regain some composure, but she was clearly rattled. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Wrong foot? Denise laughed bitterly. Joy, you accused me of using my mental health struggles for publicity. You suggested that an entire generation of people are just coddled and overly sensitive. You turned a conversation about helping people into some sort of nationalist attack. There's no right foot to get off on after that. Sarah Haynes made a desperate attempt to salvage the segment. Maybe we can find some common ground about the importance of mental health resources. But Joy wasn't ready to concede anything. Her pride had been wounded, and she was determined to get the last word. You know what, Denise? Maybe the real problem is that people like you have made mental health into such a sacred cow that we can't even have honest discussions about it anymore without being attacked. The words hit the studio like a thunderclap. Denise went very still, and for a moment, Everyone thought she might actually walk off the set. Instead, she took a deep breath and delivered what would become the most quoted moment of the entire confrontation. "Sacred cow?" Denise said quietly, her voice carrying more authority than all her previous shouting. "Joy. Mental health isn't a sacred cow. It's a matter of life and death. And if you can't understand the difference between honest discussion and harmful stigmatization, then you have no business having this conversation at all." She picked up her microphone pack and began removing it, clearly preparing to leave. "That's right. Run away when someone challenges you," Joy called out, making one final desperate attempt to maintain some semblance of control. Denise stopped and turned back to face Joy one last time. "And I genuinely hope that someday you'll understand the damage that ignorance can cause." With that, she walked off the set, leaving Joy standing there as the cameras continued to roll, and the studio remained in stunned silence. The remaining co-hosts scrambled to fill the dead air, but nothing could erase the impact of what had just transpired. It was clear that this wasn't just a disagreement between two television personalities. It was a clash between two completely different philosophies about mental health, empathy, and the responsibility that comes with having a public platform. As the show finally cut to commercial, viewers across the country were left processing what they had just witnessed. This wasn't just entertainment. It was a raw, unfiltered moment that exposed the very real divisions that exist around mental health awareness and advocacy. What did you think of this explosive confrontation between Denise Welch and Joy Behar? Do you think Denise was right to walk off, or should she have stayed to continue the debate? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of celebrity clashes and behind-the-scenes drama. Let me know. Was this the most intense television moment you've ever seen?